I was only about 8 years old when this happened, so some of the details have faded, but my parents have filled in the blanks over the years. And even with my memory being foggy, there are certain parts of that night that still feel disturbingly clear. I grew up as an only child, lonely sometimes, sure, but the upside was that my parents poured a lot of attention into me. They always went out of their way to make things fun. Every October, without fail, they turned our basement into a little haunted walkthrough. It wasn't professional or anything, just hand-me-down decorations, fake cobwebs, some old party lights, and a ton of enthusiasm. They did it for charity, too. Anyone who wanted to go through the haunted basement had to donate a couple canned goods. At the end of the weekend, my parents would bring everything to a local food pantry. They even printed flyers and handed them out at my school and a few other elementary schools in the area. We lived in an old two-story brick house on the edge of Milford, Ohio. Most of the houses on our street were the same, historic, decades old, and not to be altered because of the neighborhood's preservation rules. That meant creaky steps, drafty hallways, and dim lighting were just normal. Honestly, the place already had a creepy vibe at night, even without the decorations. Every year, my cousins Leo, Mark, Chris, and Evan came over to help run the haunted house. They'd dress up in masks and hide in corners waiting to jump scare the kids who came through. That year, they all wore identical blank white masks, smooth, expressionless, and unsettling, almost like cheap knockoff theater masks. The event was going great that night. Tons of kids and parents coming through. But my parents later told me something strange happened early on, before the rush started. A man showed up alone, carrying 2 big grocery bags full of canned food. He said his wife and daughter were planning to stop by later, and he wanted to drop these off early. My parents didn't recognize him, but they weren't about to turn down a donation. They thanked him, he gave a weird half smile, lingered a little too long, then finally walked off. As the sun went down and things got busier, the basement got packed. Kids were screaming and laughing, people were bumping into decorations. It was chaos, but the fun kind. At one point, my friend Lila ran up to me crying. She said someone wearing one of those blank white masks had grabbed her by the wrist and tried pulling her into one of the storage closets. I told her it was probably one of my cousins messing around, but she shook her head, terrified, insisting the guy hadn't said a word. That's when the pit formed in my stomach. I found my parents and told them. They took it seriously and went downstairs. They checked in with my cousins. Leo, Mark, and Chris were all accounted for in their usual spots. But one thing was off. Evan wasn't there. Just as people began realizing something was wrong, Evan came rushing down the stairs. He said he'd just gone upstairs for a bathroom break, and when he came back, his mask, his identical white mask, was gone. He thought one of the others had stolen it as a joke. That's when my parents shut the entire haunted house down. They cleared everyone out and called the police. Officers searched the whole place, basement, closets, backyard, but found nothing. I managed to fall asleep that night, but a few hours later, I woke to this soft tapping on my bedroom window. It was rhythmic, deliberate. I was too scared to get up, so I just pulled my blanket over my face and tried to ignore it. After a while, it stopped, and eventually I drifted off. But maybe 2 hours after that, I woke up again, this time to scratching. Harsh, desperate scratching along the frame of my window. Something inside me snapped, and I threw off the blankets, marched to the window, and ripped the curtains open. A face was staring back at me. A pale, blank mask. Just inches away from the glass, I screamed so loud my parents nearly broke my door off its hinges. When they looked, the person was already gone. Another police search, again, nothing. Months passed. Things settled down. Security measures relaxed. And then one day I came home from school, threw my backpack on my bedroom floor, and froze. There was an anonymous-style white mask lying neatly at the center of my bed. It looked exactly like the ones my cousins wore that night. But what made my skin crawl was the black handwriting across the forehead. My full name. We called the police again, but there wasn't much they could do besides write a report. My parents installed more cameras, reinforced locks, even put window sensors upstairs. We never caught the guy. Nothing provable ever happened after that, though I swear I kept hearing faint tapping on my window at night for months. I'm older now, living in a different place, far away from that house. But every so often, I still think about that white mask and the fact that someone out there knew my name and knew exactly where I slept. This happened when I was about 10 years old. I'm 26 now, but I still remember that winter like it was yesterday. My family had driven out to my great grandfather's place in rural Wyoming for Christmas break. It was the first holiday after my parents' divorce, and my mom's new boyfriend came with us. My great grandpa lived on the outskirts of a tiny reservation town, maybe 1,200 people total. His house was small, 2 stories, surrounded by fields and patches of forest. I loved that property. I still miss it. The day after we arrived, my aunt, uncle, and cousins surprised us. They'd driven nearly 9 hours even after saying they couldn't come because of work. Back then, my cousins and I were really close, so it felt like the best Christmas gift in the world. One night, my uncle, my mom's boyfriend, and my cousin Tyler, who lived next door to my great grandpa, came over. The adults sank into their usual grown up conversations, so the kids, me, my cousins Liam, 10, Carter, 13, and Brianna, 11, decided to go down to the basement and play our favorite game, Monster. The rules were simple. Liam and Carter were the monsters, hiding somewhere in the pitch black basement. Brianna and I had to find them. They'd make occasional noises to give us hints, and if we got too close, they'd jump out, growl, and chase us to the top of the stairs, our safe zone. Yeah, it sounds dumb now, but back then it felt terrifying and exciting. For the first round, the boys went downstairs to hide, while Brianna and I waited 2 minutes. Then we headed down. The only light in the basement came from the wood stove and a little moonlight slipping in through a window. Even knowing it was just a game, the darkness made everything feel tense. 5 minutes later, Liam and Carter jumped out and scared us. We screamed, ran upstairs, and immediately begged to play again. Round 2. This time I went first. When we started down the stairs, we heard one of the boys accidentally bump into a wall. Brianna laughed nervously. We kept going, but something felt off. About halfway down, I stopped so suddenly Brianna almost ran into me. In the faint glow from the window, I could see a silhouette, someone standing outside. "Why are you stopping?" Brianna whispered, annoyed. I just pointed. Her whole expression changed. "Liam? Carter? Stop messing around. There's someone outside." To our surprise, Liam actually responded from somewhere to our left. "You're lying. Nice try." "No, seriously," I whispered. "Look at the window above the TV." A moment later, Liam and Carter crawled out from under the ping pong table, both confused. Carter scoffed and said, "It's probably Uncle Drew outside smoking." But I knew it wasn't. My uncle always smoked on the front porch, never around the back windows. Then Liam rolled his eyes and said, "Fine, it's probably Grandpa checking on the house. Just go upstairs and look if you care that much." So I did. I climbed the stairs, pretending like I was grabbing a drink or something, and peeked into the living room. Every single adult, including my great-grandpa and Uncle Drew, was sitting there. My stomach dropped. I went back downstairs, shaking. "No one's missing," I told them. "Someone really is outside." The boys finally realized we weren't joking. Their faces went pale. Brianna started crying, and I whispered for her to be quiet. We huddled at the top of the stairs trying to figure out what to do. Liam and Carter tossed around stupid ideas like grabbing a gun and taking the guy out. We didn't want to tell the adults. We were scared of getting in trouble or not being believed. After a few minutes of whisper fighting, we cautiously went back down. The silhouette was gone. We figured whoever it was had wandered off, so we decided to quit the game and play ping pong instead. We flipped on the basement lights, and that's when we saw it. The window was cracked open. Had it been like that before? My eyes drifted across the basement toward the old recliner my great-grandpa kept down there. My heart nearly stopped. A man, mid-40s, unshaven, wearing a dirty jacket, was sitting in the chair, staring at us like he'd been watching the whole time. We froze. Then he smiled, slow, wide, unsettling. He started to stand. I screamed, "Run!" We bolted up the stairs, slammed the basement door, and sprinted into the living room, sobbing and yelling that someone was downstairs. My uncle, who was a sheriff's deputy, grabbed one of my great-grandpa's guns and went down. It felt like forever before he came back up. He said no one was there. We all went outside, and that's when we saw the footprints in the snow. Fresh tracks leading from the basement window across the yard and toward the driveway. Nothing was stolen. Nothing was broken. But someone had been inside that basement with us. We spent the rest of the night clinging to our moms. I slept in my mom's bed because I was too scared to close my eyes alone. My great-grandpa was furious that the basement window could be opened from the outside, but beyond that, he was just grateful we were unharmed. He passed away in 2018. I miss him a lot, but ever since that night, I can't be in a basement alone. Even now, as an adult, something about dim stairwells and dark corners still puts a knot in my stomach, and I don't think that fear is ever going away. Before I get into what happened, I should explain a little about our cat, Milo. Ever since I was a kid, Milo has slept in the lower level of our house. Every night, without fail, one of my parents would scoop him up from wherever he was loafing and put him downstairs. They hated waking up to cat hair on their pillows, and honestly, I can't blame them. Milo was technically an indoor-outdoor cat too, so if we forgot to put him downstairs at night, he'd start yowling at 2 or 3 in the morning, demanding to be let out. The downstairs level is huge, basically the biggest room in the house, so we assumed he enjoyed having his own little kingdom at night. But about 3 weeks ago, he started acting off. There's a small landing at the top of the stairs that lead to the lower level. That's where we'd always place him before closing the door. Normally, he'd trot right down into the dark like it was nothing. But one night, after setting him on the landing like always, I shut the door and started getting a drink in the kitchen. That's when I heard it, Milo meowing behind the door. Not just once. Repeatedly. That was weird. He never walked back up the stairs before. I opened the door thinking maybe someone forgot to refill his dish, but Milo darted right past me into the living room like he was chasing something. His dish was full. Nothing seemed wrong. I put him back on the landing, shut the door, and tried not to overthink it. The next 2 nights were the same. I'd hear him whining after a few minutes, and every time I opened the door, he'd still be sitting at the top of the stairs, staring down into the dark, like he was waiting for something to come up. I wondered if he was just getting old, but I didn't want to admit that. Then one afternoon, he refused to come inside the house at all. Usually he'd sit by the side door until someone noticed him through the glass. This time, he was curled up on the welcome mat, not moving much when I opened the door. I pet him a bit and went back inside. Hours later, he was in the exact same spot. It was getting late, so I picked him up and carried him inside. He wasn't thrilled. I knew he'd fight going downstairs again, so I let him crash in my room. He seemed calmer that way. But of course, that didn't last. For the next couple of days, my dad kept complaining that someone was leaving the downstairs door open. He was furious because it let the cool air escape, and he constantly reminded us that the electric bill wasn't a charity. I figured it was my younger brother. He's the type to walk through a room leaving every possible door and drawer open. I didn't think much of it. I was just glad Milo was acting normal again. Then one night, around maybe 2 a.m., I woke up randomly. I glanced at my doorway and froze. There was a silhouette standing there, perfectly still. The hall nightlight was on, so I could clearly see the outline of a person. Tall, with their shoulders slightly hunched. I assumed it was my brother, so I mumbled his name. The figure stepped back out of sight, no answer. I was too tired to care, so I rolled over and went back to sleep. A couple of days later, we finally figured out what had been keeping Milo away from the downstairs level. Fleas. The whole place was infested. It was disgusting. They were everywhere, on the carpet, the furniture, the baseboards. We had never had a flea problem before, and Milo wore a flea collar. My dad yelled at my mom for forgetting to change it, even though she swore she had. He went nuclear on the cleaning, vacuuming, spraying chemicals, washing everything in sight. He told us to avoid the downstairs for a few days so the remaining fleas would die without a host. That sounded reasonable enough. I figured that was the end of the weirdness. But a few nights later, I woke up again to something strange. Light was flickering under my bedroom door, not like someone walking by with a phone flashlight. It was the hallway light switch being flipped on and off, over and over. I told myself it was my dad getting up to use the bathroom, but the flickering went on way too long. It made my chest tighten. I stared at the bottom of the door until the light finally stopped. Eventually, I fell asleep, but I felt sick the whole night. A few days passed with nothing else happening, and my dad finally announced the downstairs was probably clear. I'd been itching to play video games down there again after school, so I went straight down. But as soon as I reached the bottom step, my stomach sank. There were still fleas, tons of them. After all that cleaning, it made no sense. I went upstairs and called my dad at work. He brushed it off, said we just needed to give it more time. But something wasn't right. Fleas shouldn't be thriving after being drowned in chemicals. So the next day after school, I did some investigating. I walked to the back of the downstairs level into the storage room, figuring maybe something had died in there. The air smelled thick and sour as soon as I opened the door. I followed the smell toward the far corner, where an unfinished crawl space connected to the plumbing. It was pitch black, and the odor got stronger the closer I got. I didn't want to go in. I turned around to grab a flashlight. That's when I heard it, breathing. Slow, deliberate breathing, coming from inside the crawl space. My whole body froze. The breathing got louder, closer. Before I could move, something lunged toward the entrance. A shape, fast and low. A hand shot out into the light. I jumped back and ran. I sprinted up the stairs, slammed the door shut, and called the police. They searched the house top to bottom, but found no one. In the crawl space, they found empty food wrappers, water bottles, and a couple blankets stuffed behind the plumbing. Whoever had been living down there escaped through the storm hatch. The officers said it was probably just someone looking for shelter, but I couldn't stop thinking about the silhouette in my doorway, or the lights flickering, or the basement door constantly being left open. My parents were horrified. We keep the downstairs door locked now. And Milo? Milo still won't go anywhere near it. Not even close.